Hey everyone, my name is Phil Seibel, and I am a cult survivor, activist, musician, and also writer. I ran away from the cult known as the Children of God, who were notorious for abusing children severely, committing crimes against humanity, and also crimes of sexual nature against children. I was lucky to escape this cult at the age of 15, and my parents consequently excommunicated me and left me more or less to die on the streets of Europe while they decided to go to Africa to continue, quote unquote, serving the Lord. So basically, at the age of 15, I had all that I had was my shirt on my back and a couple bucks in my wallet. And over the last 3 decades, basically, I'm now 45, so pretty much exactly 30 years later, I've managed to carve a life out for myself here in Switzerland. And about 4 years ago, I came out against the cult and also against the statute of limitations for crimes against children. Because, like, for example, in Switzerland and Germany, you have about 20 years of time. And then if you don't press charges within these 20 years, there's nothing you could do. And basically, the abusers who, committed severe crimes just walk free. And the reason why I'm an activist against the statute of limitations is because I see the very, very real life-altering effects of abuse and of carrying this abuse with you. And also because many children, especially when they're very small, if they're sexually abused at a very young age, often it takes them 2-3 decades to even process it, understand that it's not their fault that they were abused, understand that there's nothing to be ashamed of, and also be able to even have the courage to speak to it, not even in public. We're just talking about like to family, friends, spouses,
Yeah.
children, and so on and so forth. So so for the government to basically say, oh, after 20 years we just don't believe you anymore that that's happened, is the most vicious and cruel thing you can do to a victim of child abuse. And that's why I will fight this tooth and nail as long as I live. And about 4 years ago, to this effect, when I first started coming out about, I was sexually abused by both my parents, my stepfather and my mother, for almost 6 years, until I was 6 years old. And I was kind of lucky in that sense that I was a boy, because girls that were in the cult, they were abused their entire childhood and teenage years and. So in that sense, I consider myself lucky in a horrible situation. So basically, 4 years ago, when I came out about this, I saw I got blocked by friends I knew for years on Facebook. I got blocked on WhatsApp by people when I started sending out like my first testimonies that I wrote about it. And I would send this to people, and then I would just see all of a sudden, like, no contact anymore. The picture on WhatsApp would go blank, and then all my subsequent messages would just be like one tick, one tick, one tick. And on Facebook too, I could see in real time over the course of 24 hours that over 300 people just unfriended me, including my own siblings. So I understand what this means, and yeah, if you would think that slowed me down, it did the exact opposite. And in order to finance my activism, I wrote some books. I first started with a fictional testimony of my suffering and abuse in the cult. And basically what I did is I took my own experiences and also experiences from other people, but I also did a very deep dive research into third person testimonies. And the thing is, this cult was so horrendous that they even documented their own abuse. Like they actually had like what they called the Mo letters, and they actually had Mo letters basically like glorifying rape, saying that if a woman got killed because she was being raped, that it was her own fault for like not willingly giving her body to her rapist, because that's a sign of devotion to God. And I just the sickest stuff on earth. So basically I took I took all of this sewage,
Yeah.
and I compressed it into one of probably the most darkest novels that you'll ever read. And if you give me a 1 star for the book, I understand. It's a hard fucking read, but it is well written. I've also gotten quite a lot of 5 stars and a lot of good reviews for it, because at the same time, this horror needs to be exposed, and that's also why I wrote it in fictional form, because I wanted to show people that victims are, if I write a book saying oh, I was a victim of sexual abuse, and then I got raped, and then this happened to me, and then that happened to me. And I go through this whole book and basically just give you like a one-to-one analysis of it. You don't see the person behind. But if I give you a fictionalized character that you can fall in love with, that you can identify with, then you can also see that, oh wow, okay, so he is all of that. He is an abuse victim, but also he's a lover. He's a romantic. He's a fighter. He's a warrior. And that's what I tried to do also in the book. So you have like these nice scenes of like teenage Tommy, falling in love, making love, having very long sex scenes. And then bang, the next chapter is then horror and abuse, and just, hell on earth. So I always try to like juggle that in the stories, and that's basically what my intention was with that book. And it took me quite a few years to write, and quite a few redacts, because the first edition that I wrote, I sent it to like some people. I published it actually on Amazon, but it's no longer available because it was really that hardcore. And a lot of people wrote me, it's like, dude, somebody might like understand you wrong, and then the police might fucking arrest you for publishing this. Like it was that graphic,
Yeah.
So the version that is now available is quite redacted, but also for a good reason, because I also had to learn through the process of writing how far to go, because I went through all of that myself, and I saw it in real life. So to write about it is not the same to talk about it as for somebody to read it for the first time and then be like, whoa, is this guy a victim, or is he like, writing this graphic detail because you know what I mean? There's a very fine line that you have to establish. So and also the other reason was, when I first started writing the book, I just did a biography. I just was like, this is my testimony, I'm going to write a book. And I opened the first opening of the book was basically a scene of being sexually assaulted by my stepfather. And then I sent that to a few people. I was like, dude, you can't start a book with that. You're gonna read like two paragraphs and be like, oh, what the fuck?
Yeah.
So that's where I got the idea to make this fictionalized character and actually start off many years after the abuse, and then have the abuse like always in backflashes like that, so that the people could actually like warm up to being confronted with the really horrific stuff in the book. Yeah. So that's me in a nutshell. I'm a father of 3 children. I'm married since about 13 years. I have a few personality disorders that I'm also in therapy for. I had, when I was younger, I suffered quite a lot from they call it bipolarism, but I just call it being fucking traumatized from my childhood.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mixed emotions, for sure.
And I also survived a few suicide attempts with alcohol and barbiturates. I was also hospitalized, clinically hospitalized for over a year in 2010. But since 2010, basically, all 3 of my kids live with me. I do music, I do art, I do t-shirt design, and I'm just constantly busy doing,
Keeping yourself busy.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's the best cure against depression.
I agree 100% with that, because I start new projects all the time, but I always have to finish them. I cannot stand it not to finish something. Like, it drives me crazy.
Oh, absolutely. That's why the first book, The Monsters That Kiss You Goodnight, it took me like almost 3 years to actually come up with the version that's now on sale. But then the second book, I just sat down and I just wrote it in like a month, because I was just like, I haven't published because the monsters. The thing is, The Monsters That Kiss You Goodnight, that is like the really hard, the awful stuff.
Yeah.
But I had to build up who is Tommy, so that in the second book that we can understand why he does everything that he does. But then we're past that threshold. So the second book doesn't have any child abuse in it. It doesn't have awful, all that kind of, the really horrible, horrific stuff.
Yeah.
Because then we get to actually follow Tommy in his just adventure of being a homeless musician traveling through Europe with a little bit of a lust for blood and adventure, as you'll find out if you read it.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you told us too how long it took you to write that first book, because I was thinking about that when you were saying how you were writing, and it was kind of like a big punch in the face, the first piece, and people were like, whoa, you can't start off with that. But I find that when I read the books, I find that that's what captivates me most. What happens in these books in the beginning, that's what's going to captivate them, that's going to catch them. But sometimes when you're a victim of abuse or a survivor, when you're telling your most rawest stuff, you're telling the truth, you're telling it, you want to be, and it's like, some people, you're right, they can't handle it, so you have to kind of take it down, figure out a way to put it, and then, but like, I honestly, as a book reader, I would have loved to read the most rawest script that you had, because for me, I'm a survivor, definitely went through a lot less than you did, but I understand the emotional trauma, but I also understand the reader. And as from coming from somebody, like I said, like, you always have those people who can, like you said, relate to certain things that are in the book or certain situations that you've been in that you're explaining. And I find that my favorite thing, just as personal, like I love to read first edition, the rawest scripts, because it's the truth. It's in certain things like that. But I feel like when I talk to readers, sometimes having to like understand it, like you said, to some people, it's not as understandable in the moment because it's all at once for them. But like for somebody who has been traumatized as well, or been through some things, like it's a little bit more relatable. But I understand. And I'm glad that you said that it took you 4 years, because I mean, that's also a way that people let out trauma,
Yes.
We write books later, and those are like some of the best books I've ever read. So congratulations on both of your books. I'm so excited to read both of them and get to see the new stuff you got coming out. But I was going to ask you before you said, how many years did it take you to get the first book out? Because like you said, you got to get years of trauma.
I had like phases where I didn't write for maybe 8 months. And then I sat down and like for 30 days did nothing but that, and those were really intense experiences too, because like you're in the moment of like writing how a father is raping a 12-year-old every day of her life, and then at 11:45 the alarm rings. You have to snap yourself out of it, go get your kids from school, bring them home, cook them lunch, then bring them back to school, and then go back into the horror rape story, and that was very, and sometimes also like if my kids would piss me off, I noticed I had sometimes a bit of a short fuse, and then even my kids would be like, yeah, Daddy, ever since you started writing that book again, you're a bit weird. Like, I was like, yeah. I couldn't say why, because I mean now my children, well, one of them is already 19, the other one is 16 and 13, so now they're kind of at an age where my oldest one asked me if I would allow her to read my book, and I just like, well, just be warned, it's a book that will make you very, very, very sad. And then she was like, yeah, no, then I don't want to read it. And I was like, yeah, probably better.
And that's okay. And that's okay. The fact that she has the choice and she came to you, for sure, when she's ready.
I also told them, my kids. I mean, the thing is, I was on television here in Switzerland and Germany. I was in the newspapers and everything like that. So it's so when all of that was happening, when it all kicked off, I had to, of course, inform my children that they might be seeing their father on TV or in the news, or that other children might be asking about, like, oh, I saw your daddy on the news, So I just gave him a quick rundown, and it is how it is, Are we playing circle roulette now?
I apologize. That was my fault.
No worries.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes.
At what age did you? Because I know that I've done this where I considered doing the book, and then I was like, well, and you actually did it. So at what age were you understanding that I'm going to do it, I'm going to sit down and do it, when you were going to write the first book? How old were you when you really just sat down and said, I'm going to start?
Well, a lot older than I would like to admit. But here's the thing. I always was an avid storyteller my entire life. Like I tried to write a children's book while I was already in the cult.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, we had to do everything with Jesus and God and everything like that. So I wrote like this really dumb story of like some animals that like, you know, get some children animals that get lost and have to like travel through the forest to go find their adult parent animals or whatever. And it wasn't a big thing. It was like maybe 5-6 pages. But I mean, 5-6 pages for like a 7-8-year-old, that's a lot. You know,
Yeah, that's still. I mean, but
right?
but it was in you to write it. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And then
Okay.
when I was in my early 20s, when I was going through this phase of depression, I started a fictitious novel that I wanted to turn into like into a TV script called The Green Lounge, which is basically a story about just people living on the edge of society, but they go into this bar, and in the back of the bar there's a door, a green door, and when you go through it, you're in like this kind of dystopian apocalyptic time where like everyone is like, you know, just basically in complete control. If you don't have like the chip, then you just get immediately like exterminated right there on the spot. They're doing like all kinds of scientific experiments, and then you have like, you know, one of the main anti-heroes, which is this guy that they did electroshock and drug experiments, and he becomes like this huge monster. And he kind of rampages and this kind of destroys this dystopian society and bursts through the green door, and then this monster finds himself like in the normal world in Germany, and he's just just completely berserk.
Yes.
Like, you know, you could drink like a whole keg of beer like in one go, like an anti-Obelix basically, you know.
Yeah.
And then the main character of the story, which is me, the street musician, like meets this monster and kind of like makes friends with him, and you know, and then they basically terrorize Germany together. And I wrote about 30-40 pages, and then back in the day, that's actually when I decided to kill myself the first time. So I abandoned Germany, went back to Switzerland to go throw myself off of a bridge. And I left everything in Germany, including the manuscript and everything. But the weird thing was, I accidentally sent it to a friend, because I was also a songwriter at the time, and I was recording with this guy in Düsseldorf, and he had a music studio. So I compiled, like, I just, you know, it was an old Windows computer, so I just typed in like DOCX, and then just, you know,
Sent it over.
copied everything that was on the computer, because it wasn't a lot, and just sent it to him as an attachment in an email. And then he saved it, and then he found this document, and then years later, maybe 10 years later, he's like, oh yeah, I was going through all these songs that you wrote, and I found this document called The Green Lounge. I was like, oh my god.
Send it over.
And that was about roughly the time, and I think I was like 35, when I went to the police for the first time to press charges against my parents. And then that basically just resulted in nothing. The Swiss government was like, oh no, fuck off. That shit didn't happen to you in Switzerland. And the shit that happened to you in Switzerland, that is already expired. So, you know, good luck, or sucks to be you, or whatever. So then I just kind of left it alone for about 3 years. And then I accidentally met on Facebook another girl who grew up in the cult, who I knew personally, who then told me that she was also sexually abused by my stepfather. And I was like, okay, now this is, because it's like, oh, if it was just me, it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
But if it's somebody else as well, then I was just like, yeah, fuck.
Yeah.
And it was actually interesting, because it was around the same time that my parents were accidentally in Switzerland, because they were like mooching all over the world, like flying here, flying there, trying to stay for free wherever. And then they emailed me saying they were in Switzerland, they'd like to see me, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna fucking kill them, you know. So I was like, yeah, come, you know. So my idea was like, I get them nice and drunk, and then I'd you know, rear naked chokehold them until they're dead, you know. And I was about to go through with the plan, and then I was like, yeah, but then how do I justify that? I can't really say it's how do you say, self-defense, because I'm like almost 1.90 meters tall. My parents are like these little old people by now, so I can't really say, oh yeah, they attacked me and I killed them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in your defense, it's a lot of trauma. You know what I mean? Like, look at what's her name?
But if you murder somebody, like in Germany, and that happens a lot, that somebody gets like raped, sees their rapist years later, kills the fucker, and then ends up going for 20 years to prison, because the German law doesn't give a fuck, you know, about that. Yeah. And I think in the US, I mean, there was a story about the one guy who beat to death that pedophile who's like raping his boy or girl or something like that.
Yeah,
and then he got off. But
I was talking about that
because he
Rose
was in the
girl.
moment, right? That guy.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember seeing that on the news.
Yeah, and he pleaded insanity. But I mean, more often than not, it usually ends up that the victim just gets punished twice. So first of all, they have to go through all of the abuse, yakety yak. Then they flip, they kill their abuser, and then they get to go to prison. So yay, what a wonderful society. Right. So anyway, then I decided I just get drunk and go to bed, and then over the next couple days I always had like my phone on record, and I was just trying to get them to like admit to anything so I could use it against them. But you know, my stepfather basically was like, oh yeah, you keep trying to like make me say something that never happened, and if you don't stop that, then we're gonna leave or whatever. So I was like, yeah, okay. And my mom, she was the sickest actually. She grossed me out the most. Because she's like, yeah, you know, when she actually said something, but I didn't have my phone right there when she said it. She's like, yeah, you know, it was really nice. Like when you were small, we used to have like they called it love up time, you know. I was like, oh, remember the love up time with mom, and now you're so big and strong and handsome. And I mean, you know, if you had like any needs or something like that, like I would be more than happy to like satisfy. And I was just like,
she offered it to you still.
Yeah.
With services. Wow.
Yeah. And she's like, yeah, you know, we think differently than most people in society, and you know that, you know, sex between loving, consenting adults, it's not a problem and whatever. I was just like, okay, you need to get the fuck out of my house now.
Right.
You've got one parent trying to cover his ass, and you have the other one trying to
basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
No, it was fucking disgusting. But it was also an eye opener for me too, because then I just realized that they will never fucking change. So,
that nothing's changed.
That's right.
For all these years.
I spent the next years just making their lives a living hell. Like I actually hired people. Well, I shouldn't actually say hired because that's an admittance to a crime. Okay, what happened was people accidentally found out where my parents were living, and they accidentally found a letter, a testimony with pictures of my parents and their actual address on my website, which I accidentally uploaded there, and then they put two and two together and then distributed accidentally all of these letters to the entire neighborhood where my parents were living, and that actually forced them to move because they were scared for their lives, apparently.
Oh my god!
So it was a tiny victory, accidentally.
Accidental victory.
We're not really sure what happened. It just kind of happens.
It's just.
Yeah, but you know, all of a sudden letters in a mailbox, and you know, somebody put them there. I was like 1,000 kilometers away, so they have the burden of proof. You know what I mean? So
right.
But you know, I have 3 girls, and they range from 21 to 9, and I've got boys too. You know, but I talk to this more importantly to my girls as my boys are listening to, because it's very important for people to understand that when it happens to a woman, sometimes if the system is rooting for them in the time, it's a lot more. I've noticed that because like we've had situations happen where I have noticed that the system has failed me as a woman, as a young woman, as an older woman. And now that I've brought children into this world, in the beginning, it was really taboo for a man to come out about sexual things like that. And then you start seeing it popping out in the news and in the churches and all these things. And I'm sitting here having to have these conversations with my daughter about how sometimes the system will fail us. The system that we put in place to protect us fails us because of the time. And like you said, it takes time for people who have had so much trauma and things to first figure out that it's not their fault. And then they have to go through the process of healing. And that takes years sometimes, you know, so many years. And so the statute of limitations is something that I'm so grateful that you advocate for, because nobody knows how long it's going to take somebody to heal.
Yes.
You know? Well, and then you got to figure out first that it's not your fault. Then you got to heal. Then you get the courage to fight back. Sometimes we don't get the courage to fight back till years later. So I sit here and tell my girls that, you know, the system fails us as women, but I have to explain to my boys that it happens to them too. It could happen to them. So they have to be careful. And that's why I'm always so strict about things. And I watch people like crazy. You know, once you've been abused, you watch people like crazy and you protect your kids 10 times more. Yeah,
and you also get much more paranoid. But here's another little thing that I mentioned that a lot of people fail to talk about, and that is the ostracism of being a victim, that you're thrown in the same pot as the abusers themselves. Like, it's almost as bad to talk about being abused as it is. Like, if I go into the street and say, oh yeah, my mom had sex with me when I was 4 or 5, I'm basically just as disgusting of a human being as she is, even though I had no fucking choice in the matter, and I was basically like coerced. It's like, oh yeah, you don't love mommy if you don't want to have sex
Yeah,
with
you're
me and all of
convinced
that.
as a child.
Yes.
But it's not your fucking fault. And I think what needs to happen is we need to take the weapons away from the abusers by making it
Yeah.
normal to openly speak about sexual abuse, so that victims of sexual abuse can feel like they're not dirty, they're not
Yes.
vile, disgusting, horrible scum, but that
Yeah.
is just something that they happen, that they can have a conversation with their boss, with their spouse, with their children, as normal as it would be to talk about any other thing. Because the moment that we make this normal in society for victims of abuse to be able to just openly talk about it, we take that power away from the abusers, because that's basically what they profit on, is the fear and also the shame of the victims not wanting to talk about what happened.
Yes. Shame is a very big word that I've always heard from people in counseling and things like that. They feel shameful because, and when it's brought into by religion, like, you said y'all were in the religious type of thing. I've noticed that. I mean, most victims will say they're ashamed, because of the shame. But I hear that that's how the manipulation happens, via shame.
Yeah.
The religion will shame them into saying, your parents are going to be talked about. You're going to be considered dirty. You made the mistake too. When they're wanting to talk and try to say, this is wrong, then, that's the manipulation that happens. They make them feel, like you said, dirty, shameful, and then embarrassed, because that's when they confuse the children, and they confuse adults still.
The gaslighting the hell out of you is what is happening.
That's when the manipulation happens, to where they think that they're dirty, and it's a shameful thing that they did, when it's not even their fault. It's the abuser's fault.
And even they go so far as to say, oh yeah, it's you fantasizing all of this stuff, so you have a dirty mind, or you have a disgusting mind, because you're making all this stuff up because you're fantasizing wanting to have sex with your parents, and how could you, and that never happened, and that's all in your mind because you're a dirty little boy. And it's just so fucked up. I mean, like I got gaslit by both my parents for decades. And when I even tried to tell, like, my uncle and my auntie, not even about the sexual abuse, just about being beaten within an inch of my life, or with the belt, or being locked away, then I started the conversation with, like, uncle so-and-so, your brother, he used to, like, really beat me. And he's like, yeah, I'm sure it wasn't that bad. And I mean, you were a very difficult teenager, so you probably deserved it. And I was just like,
wow, right? Yeah.
And I'm sorry, excuse my language, but that's a dick move.
Yeah.
But yes, I feel like too, when it's happening to a child or a teen, and the adult who's the the predator, a lot of times I hate that it's because they're an adult that they say, nobody's going to believe you.
Yeah.
I've heard that from so many kids that have grown up until late age being abused like that, physically, emotionally. Who's going to believe you? You're a bad kid. And then the parent or the abuser, or whoever is doing it, makes them out to be a bad kid, so that it covers their ass later.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's abuser strategy 101. Basically, the child is rebellious, the child is willful, the child is disobedient.
He's saying things that are made up.
The last time that my stepfather beat me, I was like 13 years old, and he proceeded to, like, punch me in the face, whip me with a belt in my face, and then I finally managed to I was shaking all over and crying, and and I actually punched him back, and I knocked his glasses right off his face, and he's blind as a bat without his glasses, so that kind of made him stop. And then, I mean, later I received the very, very drastic repercussions of me hitting him once in the face. But he went around basically afterwards. He called all the other adults that were out, like, witnessing, as they say in the cult, called them back because I viciously and unprovoked attacked him and tried to beat him up, and he was really scared of me. So then I was, like, working in the kitchen, and then he came with 3 other adult men, pinned me to the ground, and carried me off into a room, screaming and kicking and frothing at the mouth, And then they proceeded to try to drive the demons of willfulness and aggression out of me by doing an exorcism on me for over 12 hours, pinned to the floor, not being allowed to go pee or do anything or drink or whatever. So it's basically like 12 hours of just nonstop torture. And to this day, and he then also told all my younger siblings, that, the reason that Phil is locked up in the room is because he was aggressive and he hit me, and he, just because I asked him to do something, which wasn't at all true.
Yeah.
Basically what happened is, they had these punishments in the cult where, like, if you were filled with the spirit of how do you say, silliness or goofiness or whatever they called it, foolishness, the spirit of foolishness is what they call
Foolishness, yeah.
So, and I had an older friend, his name, well, I'm going to give you a fake name. Let's say his name was Jonas. So Jonas, he was 15, I was 13. And Jonas, he was always getting punished for being goofy because, you know, he was very, he was a 15-year-old, you know, so he's constantly making jokes about dicks and balls and, you know, calling everything an it and and so funny and and it's this and it that, and, you know. And he was absolutely entertaining, and I love the guy, and I actually am still friends with him all these decades later. But anyway, so he was constantly getting, like, one of the more severe punishments that didn't involve physical nature was that you had to wash the dishes for over sometimes 100, 200 people by hand by yourself. But here's the thing. Jonas was also responsible for the cooking of the meals on that day. So to me, it didn't make sense that he had to wash, at the time, I think we were like about 120 people in the house. So he not only had to cook lunch for everybody alone, but he also had to wash up all the dishes by hand. And so I went to Stephen. I'm going to use his real name because fuck that guy. Stephen, my stepfather, the anus-licking horse felcher. And so let me help Jonas do the dishes. And he's like, no, you have your own chores to do or whatever. And I was just like, you know, fuck you. You're insane. You're just an asshole who thinks you can just bully everyone around. And he's like, what did you say? And he's like, and then he's like, are you drunk or something? Like, it's like, what are we drunk, man? It's like 7 a.m, you know, I'm not drunk. And then he's just like, starts pulling his belt out, and he grabs me by my ear and drags me up this flight of stairs and pushes me into like this like toilet cubicle and just starts like beating on my back and hitting me with the belt. And somehow I managed to like escape from underneath him and get out of the toilet cubicle. And then I hit him, you know? I mean, I was like, I had like blood on my face, and I was like, you know, bruised and beaten all over. Yeah. And he managed to turn that into, I attacked him because I didn't want to do what he told me to do. You know, so that's the kind of gaslighting from a sociopath that I had to deal with my entire life. And actually, I went to go confront him in Germany last year in February, and I swear to God, when I saw that man, I don't know how I managed to just not kill him right there on the spot with my bare hands. Because when I got out of the car, like, I was also holding the testimony of him raping this other, like, 8 or 9-year-old girl. And he actually had my mother go get her in the dormitory where she was sleeping. So I know that happened because her testimony corroborates what I saw for real. Because I'm 2 years younger than her, so I was the youngest in our age group. She was one of the oldest ones. And my fucking mother would go get that girl almost every night out of her bed and be like, oh yeah, you get to go sleep in the garden house with Stephen. And I'm like, what? And
like it was a prize.
Yeah, like it was like, yeah, exactly. And then later on when she was like even describing down to like, you know, the shape of his dick and the color of his underwear and everything. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to kill that motherfucker, you know? So I got to Germany, and then I there's a video on YouTube of me confronting him actually, with the letter and everything like that, and my wife was like filming it from inside the car, and we made sure to not actually show his face because I mean now I would have, but back then we were like, because I told him also we were coming too. He's like, if you come here in person, I'm calling the police on you. It's like, for what? I'm coming as your son to stand in front of your house and tell you to your face that you're a child fucking asshole, you know, rapist. Yeah. That's not a crime.
Yeah, it's not a crime. It's not a crime to have conversations.
Beat you up or whatever. And then to put myself on the safe side, I called the police telling them that I'm going to come. And they're like, oh yeah, we know because your stepfather already called us. And they're like, you're not going to like try anything stupid or you're not armed or anything. It's like, no, I'm coming. No. I'm going to give him a testimony and then I'm going to leave again.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to film myself doing it for my YouTube channel. And then they're just like, well, just make sure you don't show his face. Otherwise, we might have to come and get you, you know? So,
yeah.
So that's what I did. So, and the results you can see on my YouTube channel. It's somewhere in the hundreds of videos I have. Yeah. I don't really have your chronology here in front of me because I have just the one thing open with the summary of the books, the synopsis, because you asked me for one. So just ask me whatever other questions you want, you know.
I did have a question. I know you said that y'all all lived in one house when you were in that occult. Was it a big house, or what was that? What was that house like situation?
There were communes all over the world. Some were as big as like the biggest jumbo homes, as they called them, in like India and the Philippines and Japan, sometimes housed to over 300 people. And the smaller communes, like the smallest communes was maybe like, we did once live, I kid you not, when I was about 10 years old, we were like in this waiting phase where they were building up some new communes in Switzerland when we just came from India. And we were in one of these like so-called waiting homes. And this waiting home, it had it had 3 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 1 living room with like a kitchenette thing. We lived sometimes up to 35 people in that thing.
Wow.
Yeah. And during school hours, we weren't allowed to go out. So that means we're basically confined in this shitty apartment.
Were y'all considered to be homeschooled? Is that what y'all were doing? Or what?
Yeah, but that's not really actually legal in Switzerland per se. And also, you know, I lived most of my childhood in Switzerland illegally in this country because they never registered us, of course. They never paid taxes. They never declared income. And we children, we weren't even allowed to know where we lived, right? So when we would like go for an outing, they would like, you know, pick us up usually with like some kind of van that had all the windows like, you know, taped shut so that people couldn't see in, but also so that we couldn't see out. Because also, I mean, let's put it like this, even back in the day, if you had a 9-seater van, you're not allowed to have 30 fucking children in the back of it sitting on the floor. Yeah. But that's what they did, you know? So I remember like all of these awful, you know, excursions, and sometimes like, I mean, they were driving around the most ridiculous pieces of shit. I remember they had like one old Mercedes or a VW LT, I think it was, I'm not sure anymore. And it had a fucking hole where I could just like see the road passing underneath, you know? And the exhaust tubes coming in and feeling like tired and shit, like, hey, can you guys like open the window in front? I think we're about to die back here. You know? I mean, I laugh about it now, but I mean, sometimes I just realize in how fucking mortal jeopardy we were as children back in the day. And like, no going to doctors, no medicine. Like, I developed severe asthma and from allergies when we came to Europe. And my mother actually, it got so bad that my mother actually was like, okay, I'm taking Phil to the doctor, right? So then he gave me like this little blue thing to inhale, and I was like, oh, I can breathe again. Oh my God, you know. And then we got home, and Stephen, he actually slapped my mother for losing her faith in God, and then demonstratively like stomped on the inhaler and threw it in the trash.
Oh my gosh!
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, and I mean, they actually had fatalities, child fatalities in the cult because of malnutrition, because of you know, lack of health care, you know, just. Yeah, just absolutely criminal. And, well, I mean, all of that's mentioned copiously in The Monsters That Kiss You Goodnight. Hence also the title, because, you know, yeah, how else are you going to call a book about parents that pretend to love their children and, oh, I love you and Jesus loves you and mwah, 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 then the next minute, like, motherfucker, beep, beep.
Yeah, exactly.
I was telling Mary in our previous like just meet before we get on here that I was reading like, because I knew the titles to your books, right? And I was telling her, you know, a lot of times when I've talked to children who have been survivors and things like that when they were children, they always talk about the monster. The word monster is used because these people are there to love you, and they're genetically supposed to be there to take care of you and show you what real love is. Yeah. And then when the night comes down, or when the room gets dark, whatever, a lot of times things are done in the darkest areas, but then they see this monster from somebody that they love. So the perfect way for a child, when it happens to them as a child, to explain it is a monster.
Yeah.
Because you hear the boogeyman, you hear the monster under your bed, you hear all these things. But when you're going through it as a child, a lot of times when you're counseling children that have been through it, they talk about the monster. Basically, they don't use the name.
That's also why I used exactly that terminology, because you have like lots of like children's books about, you know, the monster this, the monster that, the cookie monster, the nom nom nom, whatever, you know. And so basically, The Monsters That Kiss You Goodnight is a children's book, a really fucked up children's book for adults, you know.
Yeah. Yes.
That's what it is, you know. That's yeah, you know.
Mary, anything?
I was just like, okay,
taking it all in.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, like, I just can't imagine like going through that, like, and having to go through the healing. Like, I've already done like a lot of healing myself for different, similar but different things. And I'm like, some of it, I'm like, oh my God, now I'm having flashbacks. And then other times I'm like, oh my gosh, I could not even imagine, like, I can't even say anything. But I mean, it's really great, like the way that, like, I kind of go back to the, when you're writing these books, it is kind of a way for you to heal, ground yourself, move forward. And I think that's really great that you went from like just like a rough childhood, just a rough 20s, you know, and then the transition, I think, is great, you know.
There's one thing you said that I find a lot that other victims of sexual abuse say that actually kind of bothers me in a way, but not to attack you, but here's the thing.
No.
I do not like it when victims compare suffering, when it's like, oh yeah, I suffered less than you, so I don't really get to have a say, or my suffering, because I'm going to tell you something. If you grow up with constant violence, with constant sexual abuse and everything, you know that to be normal. So you also you handle it differently. Let's say, for example, you're a girl, you were always loved by your daddy, your mommy, you were never abused, you always had every wish, every granted, and all of a sudden, let's say your mommy leaves your daddy at the age of 9. She marries a stepdaddy, and then he comes home one night and brutally rapes this 9-year-old for the first time ever in her life. That event could be way more scarring than somebody who was abused all their fucking life, because
and considered it to be normal.
The one person thinks it's kind of normal, and the second one is just like blown out of high heaven. And because you can't really compare, you know what I mean? Like,
you're right.
I had this really good. Well, when I was in psychiatry, this is a bit of a tragic story, but I met this girl, beautiful, like, like she could have been on Victoria's Secret model, Heidi Klum, Germany's Next Top Model. Absolutely gorgeous specimen of a human being. But by the time I met her, her body was completely blown out of proportion from, the antidepressants, and had like, a waterlog, and, completely swollen up, and 20 kilos, just, and she hated how she looked. And the reason why that's happened is because she was gang raped after a football game in Bern by like 5 people, and then she tried to kill herself, she kept trying to like hit her carotid artery. And when I met her, like she was just being able to like slowly start to like go out, to leave the clinic, not on her own, but like leave at all, because she was just so scared of something happening to her again. And then I sometimes I met up with her, and then once or twice I actually went with her in town to go like get an ice cream, or go to the university to like listen to some professor talk. Like sometimes they have like these open university meetings. And one day we agreed to meet up, and I didn't have the best of memories back in the day, because I was also I had like tried to kill myself. That's why I ended up there, and I ended up in the psychiatry with like over 4.2 promille in my blood. And the doctors were actually surprised that I was still like walking and talking like everything was normal. But I had like a proper psychosis, and so I was a bit brain damaged because of, and it wasn't the first time either. Like it was many times that I did that, and I was lucky. And then the one time that I really actually should have died, somebody my roommate at the time actually found me, called the ambulance and whatever. So this one day, I forgot that I was supposed to go meet her at the university, and then she ended up having to walk home alone or something like that. And then I saw her back, and I was like, "Hey, how are you?" And she's like, "I had to walk home alone. Where were you?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I forgot." And then I guess for her that was just like, okay, yeah, I'm worthless. And then she went into her room. Oh, well, she first went into the kitchen, grabbed herself like a knife, went into her room, and killed herself. Yeah. And I blamed myself for years for that, and then I just had to tell myself, she was going to kill herself anyway, and that was just, she had like all these scars from previous attempts. And stuff like that. And I had to really just tell myself, it's not my fault, like you can't save everybody, And that's also a kind of in the point in the book The Monsters That Kiss You Goodnight, that also deals with, like, you know, Tommy having to deal with suicides of people that he grows to love. And that's basically the whole digestion of situations like that in the real world in the book, where Tommy just has to basically say, well, look, I can save, I can try to help, I can try to be there, but at the end of the day, I'm not responsible for other people. I have to I have to first and foremost look out for Tommy, you know.
Yeah.
And if I have the energy or the strength to give something away to somebody, then good. But if not, then I can't, you know, I can't like hold myself responsible for the actions of other people, you know.
Yeah.
And in the book, it's basically kind of along the same storyline. I'm not going to try to spoiler, but you know, basically the story is, he sees a girl getting abused in a very horrible way, and she was like before this really nice girl, Christian, never smoked or drank or never used a curse word in her mouth, you know, and saving herself from marriage, and then this shit happens, you know. And then you'll have to read the book to but you know, it's also the whole change of personality, the whole change of, like, you know,
the transition that happens.
Yeah, because of that. And that's why, you know, like a person that like Tommy in the book, who's like abused his entire childhood, you know, raped, tortured, beaten, and he's still, you know, surviving, and he's still living. But then this one fucking incident happens to one person, like in real life, like with this, you know, girl, and then she's like, fuck it, I'm pressing delete, you know, I'm pressing the reset button, you know. So that's why I think it's very dangerous to compare victim stories, because what doesn't kill me might kill somebody else for real, you know. And
that's a reality. That's a reality.
Especially if they're like, oh, my trauma is not as big as somebody else's trauma, but it still bothers me so hard that I'm thinking about killing myself. Then maybe that's devalidation of your own trauma could actually be a stepping stone towards the final act of pressing delete. That's why I just want to say to all of you, you know, victims of sexual assault, never diminish your own experiences just because maybe you know somebody who had, you know, de facto it's never worse. It is rape, it's assault, it's all fucking awful.
It's all fucked up,
exactly,
for real.
Yeah, because there's definitely like a lot of different scenarios, different things, different people, different smells. Different, you know, you never know. So I see what you're saying for sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
So shall we? Are we at the synopsis yet, or where are we in your program?
I have no idea. I was just going with the flow.
Yeah, no, it's all good. We definitely talked about the books. I'm excited. I haven't yet got to read them, but I'm definitely ordering them. I know Mary was reading them.
And yes, make sure that you leave a comment and like you subscribe. He also has a YouTube channel as well. When you go and order this book, make sure that you leave a review.
Yes, after reading it, please. Those reviews really do count for us too as authors. Yeah, they help us understand, you know, do they like it, do they not, how did they feel about it, you know.
I did actually prepare for you guys summaries of the books, especially for your show. So if you want, I can read that live. It's a page each. Would that be interesting?
Give our readers what they want.
All right, so the summary of The Monsters That Kiss You Goodnight. I worked on this afternoon, especially for you guys. So, The Monsters That Kiss You Goodnight is a harrowing, deeply personal novel that follows the journey of Tommy, a young boy who grows up in a nightmarish world of abuse, religious extremism, and crime. The novel, told through his perspective, delves into the psychological and emotional turmoil of a child forced into adulthood far too soon. Drawing from real-life experiences, the book paints a vivid and unflinching portrait of survival against overwhelming odds. From an early age, Tommy is subjected to severe neglect, exploitation, and manipulation within a cult-like religious community. The so-called love of his family turns out to be a twisted nightmare of control, sexual abuse, and extreme punishment disguised as devotion. As he grows older, Tommy is further thrust into a world of street life and crime, navigating dangerous relationships and constantly struggling to define his own identity in a society that has failed him at every turn. Yes. Yet Tommy's story is not merely one of despair. It is also a testament to resilience, inner strength, and an unyielding pursuit of freedom. I actually write better than I read.
Okay.
Cast aside by the world, he finds himself entangled in the underbelly of illegal trafficking, drugs, and prostitution, forced to navigate a brutal landscape where survival means making impossible choices. In his desperate attempt to protect those he loves, he is driven down a path of extreme retribution. His journey is one of heartbreak and loss, yet also of defiance and self-discovery. The novel delves deep into Tommy's harrowing experiences within the cult, exposing the psychological warfare used to manipulate its members. From forced labor to ritualistic punishments, the horrors of his childhood shape every aspect of his life. The reader is taken through the mind of a boy who has never known true safety, love, or stability, offering a visceral and emotional charged account of what it means to grow up in captivity. Each chapter peels back another layer of his suffering, revealing the scars, both physical and emotional, that he carries into adulthood. Tommy escapes the cult and ventures into the unknown, a world outside proving to be just as cruel. Betrayal, addiction, and violence follows him at every turn. He struggles to find moments of happiness and purpose, but the shadows of his past refuse to let him go. The more he tries to distance himself from his upbringing, the more he finds himself drawn into a cycle of trauma and vengeance, questioning whether true freedom is even possible for someone like him. As the novel reaches its climax, Tommy is faced with a moment of reckoning, one that forces himself to confront not only the monsters from his past, but also the darkness growing within himself. The journey he embarks on is brutal and unforgiving, and by the end, the reader is left with a haunting question. Can someone who has been forged in violence ever truly escape? The Monsters That Kiss You Goodnight is a raw, unfiltered exploration of pain, survival, and the desperate search for redemption.
You heard it, guys, straight from the author. I like that. I like that you read that for them so they know, like, if they were kind of questioning the book, I know they're going to want to read it now.
Yeah, well, the synopsis that's online, it's a little bit more geared towards the violent aspect of it, and I love the end quote. It's and now Tommy has a gun. So that.
Yeah, you know what? That has been like in my head too. I'm like,
because I always wanted to write a synopsis that ends with "and he has a gun." Yeah. Because like, okay, in the U.S., like having a gun, like everyone has a gun, but here in Europe, like having a gun, that's something like, wow, that's like, if you own a gun, then you're like the baddest of the bad boys, you know?
really?
And Americans like, what do you mean? My 10-year-old has 2 guns, you know?
That's funny, because I'm like from the South, so they're like, if you don't have one, then who are you? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
coming from Texas, like it's such a thing. I didn't realize it until I left Texas and I moved to New Mexico, that everybody, I guess, when we were younger, one of my friends told me, he came from New York. He's like, we think y'all ride on horses down here and that y'all have guns. I said, well, we all got guns.
But we do. We don't all got horses, but it's a thing. Like people do be riding horses. I see.
Yeah, in the town, in the cities, like I've lived in Austin most of my life, and so I used to see people coming in from outside of Austin on their horses.
What do you think a cowboy church is? It's just a group of people worshiping Jesus and riding horses. That is literally what a cowboy church is.
But see, like we grew up, so like for us, we grew up around horses, ranches, Texas. Even though I'm from the city, and I've gone to the during summers I went to the country with my grandparents. But coming from Texas, I thought it was normal that everybody had a gun. Everybody had a gun. We're in Texas.
That's the thing.
When I moved outside of Texas, everybody's like, no, we gotta get a license, we gotta do this. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? Nobody cares.
You know how much a gun
like,
costs?
Are these loaded?
You know how much a gun costs? Like a small, like, I don't know, not even a 9mm. Let's say like a
baby handgun or something,
a 33 or a 22. How much one would cost on the black market here? Okay, let's say, what does a 9mm cost in the U.S.? Like if you went to the store and bought one?
Anywhere from like 120 to maybe, just depending on.
If you find one for 120, I want to know.
Me too.
But I would say, like, a little over that, like maybe like 200, a little over 200.
You want to know what it would cost in Europe to get your hands on a 9mm if you even had the connections?
How much?
How
Guess.
much?
Guess. Just let me.
Oh my
entertain
God.
I'm gonna
you.
throw a big number. I'm gonna throw a big number. It's so
1900.
taboo. I'm gonna say 1,000.
No, I say $1,900.
What?
$4.
Oh my gosh!
$3,000 US.
Between $2,000 and $3,000. Yeah.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Wow!
Oh my gosh! I had a specific number in there. I was like 1954.
Wow! Like, do you see how like how different it is? Like
Yeah.
that's like to me that's like wow, whoa.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like in the book, Tommy finds a gun. I'm not going to say how, where, or why.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
he
I'll give it up.
like basically once he has this gun, he knows that this could be like a salvation for him later, so he buries it
Right.
somewhere because guns are just that fucking rare. Like, and especially if you're a 14-year-old and you get your hands on a real gun, it's like, oh my god, this is like my most prized possession in the world. So I sometimes I wonder how many firearms are just buried somewhere under rocks in Germany because
because they're hiding them. Yeah.
You're like, this rock looks a little sus. What's under it?
Pile of rocks. What's that?
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's like basically the first book deals with like the whole character build of Tommy and why he's like on this. The first book basically we get to understand why Tommy is becoming the person that he is, and he calls himself basically an angel of retribution, which should be like, he basically turns into the youngest vigilante ever on the planet at the age of 15. And you know what really fucked me up is I had some like feedback and reviews from people who wrote me. It's like, yeah, your story is just so unbelievable. No 14-year-old goes on like a killing spree or like has sex with 16, 17-year-olds or like gets into fights and all that. It's like, have you been to Brazil, dude? Or have you been like to like literally anywhere in the world? Like 12-year-olds prostituting themselves. You have 14-year-olds like driving motorbikes, like killing people for $50.
What?
Yes.
It's like,
that'd be a culture shock for me. I'd be like, wait, hold on. I'm sorry. What? Let me grab my beer. Like, I need to process.
And in 90s Germany, if you were in the wrong crowd, I mean, fuck, when I was in this boarding school for real now, there were like 14, 15, 16-year-old girls. If you had 50 marks, they would fucking suck your dick, Yeah. Maybe even for 20, and those are like girls I went to school with, and sometimes, you'd see one of them getting in somebody's car and then just being whisked away and then returning like 2 hours later and we all like, yeah. And then smelling of rubber and condoms and having that dick breath,
Yeah.
So, it wasn't actually all that far-fetched from the truth. And, that's what I always say. It's like, if you think that my stories are unbelievable, be fucking glad, because that's not supposed to be normal. But then don't fucking gaslight me and say that what I went through is unbelievable. It's like my cousin, she said that too. It's like when I first wrote my first testimony about, and I used extremely colorful language. I was basically like, a little, I wrote in the testimony like, a little boy's anus is for poop and not for like getting a dick shoved up. And I went for it, fucking went for it.
Yeah.
And because I wanted to really, and I sent off this letter to all my relatives at Christmas with as a Christmas card. Yeah. So, because I really wanted to mess up Christmas for every person, because every Christmas I always get depressed and slightly suicidal because I lost my family, I lost my childhood and all that yakety yak. So it's like this year I'm gonna give them the most disturbing Christmas card ever.
Hell yeah.
And then my cousin, she wrote me and she's like, I actually believe all of that happened, but parts of it I just don't believe. And I was just like, well, what parts? It's like, I'm not going to tell you because then you'll just change your story, because I want you to be believed when you get interviewed by the police. I like, you probably mean about like a 3-year-old being raped by his stepfather. It's like, yeah, that's not possible. It's just like,
it's worse.
Just believe me. A little.
There's a whole occult about raping babies. So
yeah. I'm not going to go into gross detail, but I'm just saying, I know what it feels like for something to enter my body, and I have never had anal sex as an adult, and but I know what it feels like. So
Yeah.
Anyway, and actually, that's actually one of the things in my first version of the book where I went into rather gross detail, and then later I toned it down quite a lot,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm.
But that you don't need a lot of words to describe something like that. Like basically, even just saying, "Oh, I feel something entering my body," that's already, for the average reader who has never had to go through that, is already in and enough of itself. When I was doing a live reading, there were actually people like, when I started reading that chapter, they just got up and just fucking left, because it was just like, just no.
It's hard for them to stomach it. Yeah.
Just no.
Yeah.
And that's actually why I was so happy when I got through with that book, because it's like, now I could actually write a book about, a young street musician fucking his way through Europe, playing guitar, drinking, and once in a while, oh, here's a pedophile. Okay, let's kill him. So basically the second book was also way more entertaining to write, and also that's why I made a part 1 to it, just so you know. The Monsters That Walk With Me, it's not the first book, it's the first book of the spin-off. So there will be probably a part 2, a part 3, and maybe even a part 4. I'm probably going to end the book when I become a father in 2006 or something like that. And we are currently in the first book, still in the year 1996. So there is definitely another decade of material, of very juicy material. Knife fights, beating people to a pulp, working security.
Now we're really good